You know, with only 9 planets and 2 luminaries, the sun and the moon, in any given chart, it's unreasonable to think that you would have a placement in each one of the 12 houses. So empty houses are bound to happen. Also, grouping and clumping is bound to happen. If planets were evenly distributed in each one of the 12 houses, that would be so boring. That's right. In this video, we're going to be talking about empty houses in the chart and why they are not to be feared or fear-mongered around, and the wealth of information that they hold if you know how to interpret them. Let's get into it. Hey y'all, it is your friendo, artist, astrologer, the Lady Ms. Vagina Jenkins. And first and foremost, I want to say happy Pride Month to all my LGBTQIA2S folks. And special shout outs to my queer and trans spectrum homies. Thank you so much for the example that you embody in the world about how it is to live in queerness, in radicalness, and how it is to transgress the gender binary. I love y'all for that. And also y'all hella cute too, hey! Even though I am 48 years old and I am an old sea witch of a queer, Pride Month still makes me feel so giddy and nostalgic and hopeful for the future of queer and trans people. Not in the way of like spending $40 on a watered down mimosa brunch, but in the way of like understanding how my life lived experience is a continuation of my queer and trans ancestors, and the ways that the young people, the youth, are carrying on that legacy. That's the stuff that really touches me and makes me feel actual pride. This month for Pride, I am celebrating by painting some of my queer and trans ancestors. I am participating in a show that will happen at the end of the month, and as soon as I have details for that, I will make sure to post them here. But yeah, it's an art show of art on tote bags. And so I have upcycled a few canvas tote bags and I'm painting 3 oil painted portraits. I've got 2 of them completed thus far. I've painted Audre Lorde, I've painted Andre Leon Talley, and I am about to start a portrait of Transcestor Marsha P. Johnson. Can I just say how beautiful it feels to use this really traditional art form of oil painting to be able to capture the essence, history, the wisdom of queer and trans Black folks. It just feels so beautiful and transgressive all at the same time. Anyway, that's what I'm up to this Pride Month. What are you getting into? What are you excited about for this June? And or what are you excited about for this Juneteenth? Put it in the comments below. I want to hear from you. Back to the subject at hand, empty houses in the astrology chart. I quite often see, this is a really common comment in astrology content just all over the internet, is people discover their birth chart and they start looking at it and their immediate thought is, oh, if each one of these houses is an area of life and I don't have any planetary placements in that particular area of life in that house in my chart, does that mean that I'm doomed? Does it mean that I won't have any success, or I'll feel empty somehow in that particular area of life? And I just want to just assert really plainly and clearly, hell no, that is not what that means at all. It just means that there are only 11 planetary placements that can be distributed in a 12-house chart. one of them is bound to be empty. So here's where I want to show you an example. I'm going to show you my chart, and I'm going to show you my empty houses, and I'm going to walk you through how I might interpret or make meaning of those empty houses, even though there are technically no planetary or luminary placements there. Okay, this is my chart, and as you can see, I have not one, not two, but 3 empty houses. These houses are the houses that are devoted to the areas of life around money concerns, how I make money, how I share my money and material resources with other people. That's the second 8th house axis, and how I relate to other people. And that's the 7th house. Okay, so looking first to the 2nd house. How would I interpret the 2nd house even though there aren't any planetary placements there? Oh, pause. This is the place where I want to remind y'all to be as specific as you possibly can with your astrologers, because when we get into the analysis of these empty charts, you will see that we can talk for quite a bit of time about any one particular placement, its aspects, any one particular house. You know, we can really deep dive and understand some really nuanced and specific information. But on the other hand, if you just go to an astrologer and say, I want an astrology reading, they can talk to you for an hour, but they can talk to you for an hour only in a really surface way that looks at all of these things. And yes, the big picture is often important, but if you have a particular concern, please articulate that to your astrologer, because they can help you really, really get into the nitty-gritty of it instead of just this surface level conversation that may or may not serve you and your needs. Okay, that's all I wanted to say. I'm not trying to preach at you, but yeah, specificity is key. All right, 2nd house in Capricorn, completely empty. So 2nd house, we want to first think about, what does the 2nd house mean to us? What area of life is this about? When I think about the 2nd house, I think about, one, how all of the houses build on each other. So if the 1st house is about me, myself, my identity, then the 2nd house would build on that in terms of, these are the resources I have at my disposal that help me feel secure in my identity. So that's one piece of information that might be helpful to know. When I think of the 2nd house, I also think of how we earn our money versus the money that is shared with us from other people. And what I'm talking about right now is how the houses come in pairs, or axes, A-X-E-S. And so this axis, the 2nd 8th house axis, could be talking about both internal and external experiences of resources. And because the 7th house is the opposite of the 1st, if the 1st house is the self, the 7th house is the other, and then the 2nd house to the 7th house, and this is derivative astrology kind of in practice. So if the 7th house is now the equivalent of the 1st house, we could say that the 8th house is the resources that result from our relating to other people. So that's me kind of explaining the 2nd 8th house axis. And so, yeah, this is that area of life about how we feel secure because of the resources that we have. This is also that area of life that talks about our internal resources versus the resources that we share with other folks or get from other folks, or owe other folks. And then getting into the sign of it all. My 2nd house is in Capricorn. And so this is an opportunity to review some things that we know about the different signs. Quizzing you, what element is Capricorn? I'll give you a couple seconds to answer. That's right. It is an earth element. And what might that mean? When I think about the earth element, I think about the importance of groundedness, of stability. This is not necessarily the energy of being moved by passion, but by being moved by the idea of planning, due diligence, staying grounded, consistent, that kind of energy. Okay. So that's something to know about how I earn my money. Capricorn, again, what modality is it in? Is it a cardinal sign? Is it a fixed sign? Is it a mutable sign? I'll give you a second to answer. Yes, that's right. It is a cardinal sign. And when I think about cardinal signs, I think about the energy of management or leadership or taking the helm. This is like the energy of coming up with an idea or starting a project and taking the reins of it. This is not the energy of sustaining. This isn't like fixed energy, nor is this the energy of transitioning. This is very much the beginner, the leadership, the manager type energy. So, putting both of those things together, this is an earth kind of second house experience, and this is a cardinal kind of second house experience. So, in the ways that I earn money, how much of it is dependent upon taking the helm, being understanding that I am a leader, and the ways in which I need to earn money by showing up consistently, showing up in a grounded way. How am I managing that workload by doing a little bit of work every day? That's the kind of energy of a Capricorn second house. So those are some pieces of information that are very useful to know. I would also think about the ruling planet. Planet is at home in Capricorn. I'll give you a couple of seconds. Yes, it is Saturn. So where is my Saturn placed in the chart, and how can that help me interpret my second house? Okay, I find my Saturn retrograde in the ninth house and in Leo. So I'm going to go from biggest unit to smallest unit. The house, the ninth house. This is about higher education. Yes, the experience of like college, university level academia, but also the experience of understanding metaphysical law and metaphysical wisdom. This is a house that can contain issues around understanding and creating your own personal philosophy of life, like why are we here? What is God? Like answering those big questions. It can also be the house that has to do with astrology, since astrology is one of the ways in which we answer some of those big questions. The ninth house belongs to the ninth third house axis, which is the axis of information. And because, as we talked about in 2 videos ago, all of the stuff that's happening in under the line of the horizon is more personal or internal related, because that's the night chart stuff that's really personal to you. And then all of the stuff that's happening above the line of the horizon is more external and more externally focused, like on the people and what the people are doing. This is the different type of information that we're talking about. So third house information is what I collect and use for myself, the conversations that I have that support, again, my sense of self, because all of these houses build on each other. My sense of self, second house, my resources, third house, my communication style, the things that I think about, the information that I gather that supports my sense of self, you know? And then the ninth house is more about higher versions of that same information. The ninth house is so much more about the application of information and how that fundamentally changes and expands our mind and our consciousness. You could also say that the third house is more about elementary school, primary school versions of learning, versus the ninth house being more about like university level, college level, or real wisdom that you share. I've heard people call the ninth house the house of disseminating wisdom. So understanding that as part of the picture of my second house, okay, how is my income dependent on my own personal philosophy making, understanding why, and understanding like universal metaphysical truths, and how is my income dependent on sharing that wisdom, disseminating that wisdom to the people externally. Then the next smaller unit, we've talked about the ninth house. Now we see that the ninth house is in Leo. Okay, so what about how I earn my money is rooted in sharing my wisdom in a Leo way. When I think about what in a Leo way means, I think about how Leo's ruled by the sun, and how in a Leo way could mean being known as a light, so like literally shining and somehow being known, seen, celebrated, or a celebrity in a kind of way. Or I think about how in medical astrology, Leo rules the heart, and how this could be a heart-centered approach to sharing wisdom. Leo is also associated with experiences of self-expression. So what about my self-expression, or showing who I am in the world and expressing who I am in the world, is part of my second house earning potential. Another thing I think about Leo is how it is a light that shines, but how that can often be like a beacon of light that attracts folks to you and ends up being a place of comfort. Quite literally, like a light in the dark. And so what about how I earn my money is in not only self-expression and shining for myself, but also in warming others. And then we get to an even smaller unit of interpreting. We have two planetary placements. We've got Saturn and the moon in Leo, and they're almost exactly conjunct. They're at the exact same degree, but they're like, what, 7 minutes apart from each other. Let's look at each one of the planets separately. So when I think about Saturn, I think about the task that has been assigned to us and the work that we are meant to do. When I'm, for example, when I'm doing a purpose-driven reading for folks, Saturn is part of what I look at, as well as the North and South nodes and a couple of other placements. But yeah, with a Saturn being in Leo and being in the ninth house, I very much think about the task of self-expression, the task of self-expression in a public way, because remember, this is the day half of the chart that's more externally focused. Think about the task of playing and finding joy and prioritizing joy. I think of the task of leading with one's heart. Also, interesting to note that there's this little R symbol next to the Saturn symbol, and that talks about the fact that I was born during a Saturn retrograde. And anytime I see a retrograde in a chart, I know that that is, or can be, the embodied experience of really internalizing the lessons of this planet, almost to the point of like ruminating on them, which I personally think is really good for a Saturn placement because of the Saturn return. I think the Saturn return is an opportunity to check in with yourself, whether you've been on task or not, and Saturn will then remove anything that is a distraction from you completing your task. But people who have internalized the lesson of Saturn, in my experience, often have an easier time of their Saturn return because they've been ruminating about what their work is for so long that there aren't really distractions to be removed. But that's my theory. Sound off in the comments if you have noticed something differently or observed something differently about Saturn retrogrades, because I want to hear what you have to say and what you think about it, because I want to be in conversation, not just yapping aimlessly. Okay, so that is the Saturn placement. There's also the moon placement that is blending its energy with my Saturn placement. And when I think about the moon just in and of itself, not blending its energy, I think about one's emotional landscape and what you need to feel emotionally safe in the world. And with a moon being in Leo and in the ninth house, I wonder about the experience of needing to feel affirmed, to feel seen, to have your self expression and the ways in which you are leading with your heart noticed, affirmed, embraced by the external communities that you belong to. Again, because this is all happening in the ninth house and in the day half of the chart, which is more external. However, the moon and Saturn blending their energy, it can be difficult. The moon wants us to expand our emotional body, but Saturn is about limits, boundaries, and structures. So these two guys sitting next to each other, it can bring about an experience of not being able to readily identify your emotions. It can bring about an experience of an over identification with emotional regulation. It can mean a difficult time accepting, asking for that which affirms you. However, I will say that Saturn is also known as the Time Lord, and things get better. They really do as it relates to Saturn. The Saturn placement stops being and feeling so much like restriction and more like a tool chest to pull from and clear boundaries to work from. For this chart, changing the heart and not allowing the boundaries, structure, feeling of being restricted in one's emotional landscape may affect positively the picture of the finances that are taking place in the second house. And then we can keep going. If we know that the ninth house is directly tied to some of the issues of the second house, then who is the planetary ruler of the ninth house? Well, this ninth house is in Leo, which is ruled by the sun. All right, where is the sun in the chart? We find it in the fourth house of home and family. So, what part does working from home or having a solid emotional foundation play in my earning potential? I would go through the exact same thing. What is the fourth house about? Make notes about that. What sign is the fourth house? It's in Pisces. Let's make some notes about that. What planets are there? Oh, the sun and Mercury. Okay, and combining that picture and understanding that that is tangentially also part of my second house earning potential. Now, going back to just the second house by itself, the second house being in Capricorn, we talked about the rulership of Capricorn or what planets are at home in Capricorn, but also what planets are exalted in Capricorn, what planets are in detriment and in fall in Capricorn, and where can I find those in this chart to understand some of the challenges that might affect my second house placement. For example, Mars is exalted in Capricorn. So I'm going to find my Mars placement, and I find it here in the third house in Aquarius. So I'm not going to go through the whole system, but in what ways is my income very much supported by sharing ideas, thinking about ideas, also particularly sharing them online because of Aquarius's association with technology and social media in particular. And then on the other end of the spectrum, my chart ruler is Jupiter because I'm a Sagittarius rising. Sagittarius is ruled by the planet Jupiter, and thus my chart is ruled by the planet Jupiter. We always want to keep track of that because it's a lot about how we experience the world. So I experience the world as a place to expand my consciousness. But Jupiter is in its fall in Capricorn. How is my second house being challenged by wanting to do too much, to expand too much? Is this the experience of having to hone in on a particular industry or two as part of my earning potential instead of broadening and thinking about all of the things that I could get my fingers into? Gay. So yeah, I'm putting that chart away for the moment because I just want to point out that we've talked for what, 10 plus minutes about an empty house. And before this video, did you think that that was possible? This is the juicy work of being an astrologer that I love. There are just so many layers of meaning, even in an empty house. So try this out. Pull out your chart. Pull out your chart. If you have any empty houses, check them out. Understand their rulerships and where those planetary rulers are placed in your chart. Look at the element and the modality of the sign ruling your second house. Look at the ways in which your second house has all of these little spider webs of connection to other parts of your chart to tell you about both the gifts and the challenges that you might experience as it relates to your empty house. It may seem daunting at first, but I promise you, once you get into it, it's really delightful work. And speaking of work, if you would like to support my ability to continue making videos like this and showing up and doing the work of sharing and disseminating my astrological wisdom, please consider becoming a member of this channel. Membership in this channel starts at $3.99 a month, and you get really cool perks like custom emojis and loyalty badges. You get to see content before it's released to the general public, and you get to support your favorite Black queer autistic astrologer and artist. That's me, hopefully. If that financial commitment seems like too much, I absolutely understand and would encourage you instead to do a one-time gift, kind of like a tip, using that super thanks button below. And if neither of those options are available to you, please consider just commenting, liking this video, saving this video because that helps me in the algorithm, or, you know, straight up sharing it to your friends and family. Spread my lore. Freaking goofball. I love me. Anyway, happy Pride Month. Thank you so much for watching this video, for being my community, and thank you, as always, for making time for queer astrology. Happy Pride!